Welcome to the MS&Me Radio Network. The broadcast shows are for informational and entertainment purposes only. They are not designed to provide listeners with specific personal, medical, or counseling advice. Individuals with a medical issue should always consult their healthcare provider. MS&Me is not responsible for content of individual shows. The views expressed by show hosts or their guests are their own. Enjoy the show.
Hi there. Welcome to the 73rd episode of A Couple Takes on MS. Hi, this is Dan Digman.
And hi, this is me, Jennifer Digman.
Welcome to our program. Welcome to this. I have relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis. I was diagnosed over 20 years ago.
And I'm Dan's wife, who I'm also living with multiple sclerosis. And I was diagnosed 21 years ago, and I'm living with secondary progressive MS.
And so with this, when we talk about on our show, A Couple Takes on MS is obviously the double meaning because we're a couple who have MS.
And we have two different perspectives, two different takes on how multiple sclerosis affects our bodies and affects our lives. And so it gives us two different perspectives and thus two different takes.
And what we're talking about today and encouraging you to think about is to use your MS voice every day. You know, we can talk about MS advocacy, MS activism, to which, and you know, we've talked about this several times on previous episodes. I mean, this is, like I say, the 73rd episode that we've done overall, and obviously advocacy is a huge component of what we do. And it's just the reality that, you know, we're living with this disease every day. You need to use your voice every day.
You need to use your voice. And Dan, when you were batting around the idea for this today, we talked about using your MS voice, and you kind of kidded about using your inside voice, and how like an MS voice, it can't be an inside voice, it needs to be a loud voice. You need to make your reality, your life with the disease. You need to share your story, and you need to get out there and advocate for yourself. And I think that, you know, using your MS voice sounds like a simple thing, because advocacy and getting involved in sharing your story and advocacy is fairly easy to do, and it can start small.
Well, I think that when you talk about living with multiple sclerosis, just straight up living with MS, obviously, we're not sitting around, those of us in the MS communities, sitting around and everything is sunshine, rainbows, happiness and stuff. We have complaints.
We have complaints.
And some of our biggest complaints are things like, I straight up, I mean, cost of prescription drugs and accessible parking lots, accessible buildings. You know, think of everything that we live with. None of that's going to change unless you use your voice. And it's just the reality. People who don't have multiple sclerosis, aren't living with disabilities, are not going to know this stuff on their own.
No, and that's why it's so important, because you have this disease. I mean, as unfortunate as it is that you've been given multiple sclerosis, that any of us have been given MS, we need to turn that into something powerful. You know, we can't just sit back and say, boy, you know, oh, my church, it really upsets me. Like, this is a personal advocacy story for me. I am in a wheelchair, which I've talked about in the past. But one day at church, I realized there weren't curb cuts to get into another entrance to church. I mean, there was one curb cut, but the other entrance, there was no curb cut, and it's fairly easy to make, for the church to do that, just to make that little modification. And that opened up a much easier entrance to church for me. And that's advocacy in action, something small like that. We're not always talking about huge efforts like going, to the government or going to your state capital or going to Washington, D.C. Start small. Make your voice heard.
And that's something, we used to get involved when we would go to the city council and have them pass a resolution/proclamation declaring March as MS Awareness Month or March whatever MS Awareness Week in our community. And it's just the reality is, how many people in our community are living with multiple sclerosis and how many other people will know that was proclaimed, that happened. Well, that was always a big deal because at that point then all of the people in leadership positions at the city council in our community, they were aware of multiple sclerosis and they're out there in the communities. And so when they hear about somebody who was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, they are aware that yes, indeed, there is a community within their community and people who have multiple sclerosis.
And there are people that are engaged and that are active in the community who are making their voice heard. And as you've said, it's been over 20 years that we've both been living with the disease. And when we started getting those proclamations passed, that was at least 14 years ago. And now, back then it may have seemed like a kind of a big effort. The community may have still, multiple sclerosis was kind of a not very talked about or known about disease. But now reports, as we've talked about on previous episodes, reports are nearly 1 million people in the United States are living with multiple sclerosis. And that's why it's so important to get out there, to get to your local government, or to get active, just so that people know multiple sclerosis has a face and power behind the disease, and that there are people who are thriving, living with the disease.
And that's the interesting thing, you talked about not needing to go to the state capitol, to the U.S. Capitol in D.C. We talked a few months ago about our experiences at the Public Policy Conference in Washington, D.C., and the involvement that we had there. You had a big day today.
Yes, I'm quite tired, to be perfectly honest, but I think any of you out there living with multiple sclerosis or another chronic illness, you may be shaking your head. Yes, you're tired too. But I think it's a tiredness where I know why I'm tired, and I'm tired because I was powerful today. And I went with my caregiver, Marcus. We went to the state capital of Michigan. We went down to Lansing, and we advocated with plenty of other people on behalf of. We were trying to make the voices heard for Older Michiganians Day, which the name is not necessarily appropriate for myself, but it is a powerful day where older residents of Michigan advocate in Lansing for issues important to them. And because I don't exactly fit the title of Older Michiganian, the disabled community are also very active in this because we're advocating for the Michigan My Choice Medicaid waiver program, which is a program that helps me and Dan, that helps me specifically so that I can stay in my own home, because technically I could be living in assisted living, because I'm no longer able to do some of the activities of daily living that a human being should be able to perform by herself. I think that's a fair way to describe that. Wouldn't you agree, Dan?
I would agree, Jennifer.
And so the My Choice Medicaid waiver program helps me stay in my home, stay in our home, and it gives me caregivers to help me with those activities of daily living. Simple things like brushing my teeth or fixing my hair or using the restroom. My caregivers, Marcus, I've talked about before, he helps me with grocery shopping, with laundry, with cooking meals, things like that. And so I get care through this program so that I can stay in my home, and I can help you, babe, with just maintaining our home, and so that you can continue working.
And I think that's why this has been such a big, important issue for us, because this is the whole thing that made it really possible for us to get married and continue to live as at the time a young married couple. I mean, we've been married for 14 years.
It'll be 14
in
years
September.
yes.
September. But those are the things, and we've advocated for this for pretty much the entire time we've been married, going down to Lansing, because that is hugely important. Majorly, it's very important to
How
us.
about that? It's very important to us.
And I think that truly is, we've talked about this, just how that kind of is how we really got ourselves involved in advocacy, going down, talking to our state senator, our state representative, to provide the funding, and why this funding is important. I think what worked for us then, and has been for years, is just that makes the most sense for the state of Michigan, rather than the state of Michigan paying money to house you.
I think the number that I heard today is that on the average it costs maybe $8,000 a month. Don't quote me on this, but around $8,000 a month for a person to live in an assisted living facility, which is a lot of money, and the government has to, help pay that bill. Whereas on the Medicaid waiver program, to keep me in my own home and to pay for my caregivers, or, to make this program work, it's about $2,500. So it's a program that financially makes sense. It's a very bipartisan program, and that's why Dan and I have advocated it. Again, don't quote me on those numbers, but it is a significant savings.
Well, significant savings, and then you're able to stay in your own home and contribute both financially and just volunteer talent-wise and stuff to your community. I'm able to contribute money back into the community with the groceries you buy, with the restaurants we go and eat at, and things like that.
And never mind the fact that the quality of my life is 100 times better because I'm staying in my own home. And I have that sense of just strength, and I am a stronger, more viable member of my community. I can be involved with my church, can be active and volunteer things. I can continue to volunteer for the National MS Society because I can stay in my home and I'm active. So this program and getting involved in the advocacy all those number of years ago when we first got married, that's been an entrance into our advocacy work. But I believe another way that we started advocating was with the National MS Society. And I can remember shortly after I was diagnosed reading about action alerts from the National MS Society about policy and legislation that was happening at the state level and at the federal level that affected people like myself, those of us living with MS. So I think that the MS Society was a really good education and entrance into advocacy. Wouldn't you agree? Was that how it was for you too, Dan?
Oh, totally. Well, yeah, because we're the package deal. We kind of got involved pretty much at the same time, really. And I think that with the action alerts, with things like that, it really makes advocacy easy. I mean, they keep up on. I think that that's always a fear if you're not involved in advocacy and just like, oh, how I keep up on all the legislative issues and I don't know the difference and stuff. I mean, trust me. I mean, we're there a lot of times too because obviously we can't have our finger on the pulse of everything that's coming down the pike at the national and state level in terms of advocacy issues, but that's where the MS Society is great because they're the watchdogs that kind of keep an eye out for things. And when stuff comes up, the action alert sends you the information. It's like, this is what we need, and it's pretty well scripted out. You just need to add your personal story, and I think that's the big thing, and that's what we've learned, is your elected officials, they're there for you. I mean, they're working for you.
And they want to hear your story. They want to know why this legislation is important to you. And they want to be involved and they want to help their constituents. And that's something that we've been really fortunate to find out, is that yes, these officials work tirelessly to try and help their constituents and to do what we elected them to do. If that makes sense, to do the policy, to worry, to be concerned about the issues that are important to us. And so when I went down to Lansing today, I met with my state senator. He came out from the Capitol and to meet his constituents sitting outside. It's a beautiful day in Michigan. We don't get those all the time, so I have to celebrate that. But he came out and he met me right there on the lawn, and we talked about the issues that were important and what the Medicaid waiver program does and how much it helps me in my life. I also met with my state representative, and he gave us a good 15 minutes where we could talk about the issues and just what this program, what it means to Dan and I. You were not there because you were working.
Because I had to work today, and I was jealous of you. I mean, I was excited for you, but it was just, I mean, because I've always gone to Lansing with you. We've always done it together, and I think it's just like, it was so exciting though to see the work that you were doing, and it was.
And vice versa, and that's what. I mean, that right there is the Medicaid waiver program working in it, proof of how it works, because my caregiver Marcus was able to drive me down to Lansing while Dan continued working. And if you didn't have this program, I dare say that it would be hard for you to work 40 hours a week and be my full-time caregiver, because I do need quite a lot of care during the day just to do those simple activities of daily living. And that's important. That's why it's so important to us. And having multiple sclerosis right at the top of the list, one of the most important issues for any of us or anybody out there living with a chronic illness is prescription medicine costs. And that there, if you're taking medicine and it's really crazy expensive or really crazy difficult to get, maybe that could be an issue where you could start advocating.
And we're doing that, especially at the federal level. I think that our senators are very supportive of driving down prescription drug prices, and I think that's what's so great about that particular issue is it's so very bipartisan. I mean, both of our senators are Democrats, but even President Trump and the Republican Party want to drive down the prescription drug prices. So we need to get the voice, because if we're not talking about prescription drugs or about Medicaid waiver or curb cuts at your church, if we're not the ones talking about it, nobody is ever going to know what your issues are. And that's where it's like, and you need to be confident. I look at this and I think, Jennifer, you went down to Lansing without me.
Yes.
And I think of the same thing. If I would have gone down without you, you did well, I would do well. But just think, what would that be like back in the day had you never gone to Lansing, had you never gone to DC? How nervous would you have been, and how nervous were you, and how do you overcome that? I mean, for everybody out there who maybe hasn't advocated and who has thought about it but gets nervous about it, how did you get over the nerves? I mean, both today or when you started.
I think the important thing is share your story. No one knows your story better than you. And so if you know what this disease has done inside your body, what it's done to your life, you share that. There's no way that you can mess that up, because no one knows it better than you do. So if you share your story, you start there, as simple as it sounds, it matters. And when you do that, you will feel more confident. Get to know legislation or matters that are important. But just start simply with sharing your story.
And that's the one thing that differentiates you from just, it humanizes the policy, it humanizes the issue to where your elected official isn't just seeing House Bill 728. They're seeing Jennifer Digman, they're seeing Dan Digman, they're seeing you in the audience. I mean, it's your story, and that sticks more than
Like a
than
bill
House Bill
number.
728.
Yeah, so I think that's pretty important. But it's the reality, multiple sclerosis can make you weak. It's a horrible disease, as we've talked about before. But this is me being strong. I can't lift a bottle of beer. I'm just weak, and that's the reality of what the disease has done to me. But I can go to Lansing and I can use my voice to sit down with a representative from my state, or to sit down with a state senator. And I feel strong when I tell my story and I share the realities of living with MS. And I think that that's one of the most important things, is it makes you so powerful. And it can be scary and it can be intimidating. But when you're done, you just feel awesome. And I think all of us living with multiple sclerosis, how many days do you go to bed saying, I was pretty awesome today? And when you have a day like that, you need to celebrate it, and you need to find the things that make you feel awesome. So if it's writing off a letter to the editor of your local newspaper, or to a column you're reading online that just doesn't agree with one of your voices or with your opinion, that's advocacy, sharing your story. Or fighting for medicine and prescription drug prices. I mean, there's so many ways to make your voice heard, and that, I would say, defines advocacy. Getting your story out and getting your point across and trying to make change to make your life and the lives of other people better.
And that hits so many points on that, and just to where you don't have to travel. I mean, it's the commenting on the social media posts, to increase the awareness there, not only with the legislators, but you're educating your community and people within the MS community and beyond of what the issues are. And I think that the more you're involved and the more you know people, the more you see that these elected officials are they're people just like you. I think
they are your neighbors.
And that's, I remember when we first started advocating, and our state representative, I can't think of his name right off the top of my head.
Was it
Bill
Bill
Call.
Call, yeah.
But we went down and we advocated in Lansing and everything, and we talked to him in the halls of the Capitol down there. And like maybe a week later, we were eating at a restaurant here in town. He was there at the restaurant and eating at the same restaurant as us, and he even came up and talked with us. And that was so cool. And when we were at a minor league baseball game, we ran into our federal U.S. congressman there, sitting a couple rows right behind us, and you're just like, they're people, and they want to hear your story, and so it's like
that humanizes them as much as telling our story humanizes us.
And it's just a matter of being loud and using your MS voice to make change. And so we really want to say it doesn't have to be Older Michiganians Day that you were at today. It doesn't have to be the Public Policy Conference in D.C. It can be every day. There's advocacy. There's things you can do to make your voice heard and make change to improve the lives for you living with your multiple sclerosis and for one of the other 999,000, whatever, nearly a million people.
Yes.
And so,
and other people potentially living with chronic illness, if you get out and share your story, that really makes you feel powerful, and that's why we encourage you to advocate and to get your voice heard.
Check out the National MS Society's Action Alert. Go there to see how you can get involved as an activist. And look us up on Facebook and on our website, danandjenniferdigman.com, or on Twitter at danjendig. Let us know, how do you advocate, how do you get involved, and why do you think it's important? But thank you again for taking the time to check in with us today for MS Advocacy, to use your MS voice every day. This has been Dan Digman
and Jennifer Digman.
Couple Takes on MS. Thanks to Blue Draft Kid for composing the music to our show, and thanks to the MS&Me Radio Network for having us. So until next time, take care.